The sound of wolf whistles and mocking laughter cut through the August heat at Fort Benning, like a blade through silk. The Georgia sun hammered down on concrete hard enough to fry eggs, and a military bus wheezed to a stop, spilling 20 fresh recruits onto the parade ground. But 200 pairs of eyes locked onto just one person. "Hey, Barbie! You lost, sweetheart? Beauty pageants across the street." Corporal Jake Morrison's voice boomed like rolling thunder, his massive frame stepping forward with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a physical confrontation. 6'4", 240 pounds of pure muscle wrapped in green camouflage fatigues that strained against his shoulders. His Oklahoma drawl dripped with contempt, thick as molasses. "Drill sergeant, who authorized a magazine model for infantry training?" The woman who'd just stepped off the bus stumbled backward, a 50-pound rucksack pulling her off balance. Golden blonde curls escaped from what had been a neat high bun, porcelain skin scattered with freckles across her cheeks, and a sharp, aristocratic nose caught the brutal sunlight. Blue eyes, the color of Mediterranean waters, blinked rapidly. Her fitted gray t-shirt clung to a frame that belonged on a runway, not a rifle range. Brown combat boots, 2 sizes too small for the average male recruit, scuffed against the parade ground. If someone had dropped her into a fashion shoot instead of a military installation, not a single person would have questioned it. "Name?" Senior Drill Sergeant Patterson barked, his sun-weathered face carved into permanent disapproval by 25 years of service, every wrinkle a testament to soldiers he'd broken and rebuilt. "Alexandra Mitchell, Drill Sergeant." Her voice emerged barely above a whisper, soft and feminine, drawing derisive snorts from the assembled platoon. "Can't hear you, Princess." "Private Alexandra Mitchell, Drill Sergeant." Louder this time, but still carrying that gentle quality that made Jake's grin widen like a predator scenting blood. Jake closed the distance, using his bulk like a wall designed for intimidation. 48 hours. That's how long you'll last before you're crying on the phone begging mommy to come get you. I'll bet a month's pay on it. But none of the 200 witnesses watching this humiliation understood that in exactly 18 minutes, that gray t-shirt would tear open, and what emerged from beneath would freeze every mouth mid-laugh, including the base commander himself. If this scene makes your blood boil with the raw injustice of it all, watching someone judged purely by appearance on the most important day of their military career, then hit that like button and subscribe right now. Stories like this need to spread, reminding us that real strength never announces itself. And trust me, what's about to happen to Alex will make you believe in the phrase, "Never judge a book by its cover," more than you ever have. Now let's watch what Jake and his so-called elite soldiers are about to face. The intake processing facility buzzed with controlled chaos as 300 recruits cycled through equipment stations, their civilian identities stripped away piece by piece and replaced with government-issue everything. Alex stood in formation line, her posture drawing the first subtle notice from those with trained eyes. While others slouched or fidgeted, she maintained what military personnel would recognize as parade rest, without conscious thought. Feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped precisely at the small of her back, spine straight as a plumb line. Her blue eyes swept the massive hall in a pattern most civilians wouldn't notice, counting exits in a 2-second sweep that cataloged 3 doors, 2 emergency panels, and the distance to each. Jake strutted past with his entourage of wannabe alpha males. "Check out those hands. Bet those manicured nails never held anything heavier than a Starbucks cup." His comment drew predictable laughs from his pack. Lieutenant Madison Clark materialized from the officer observation area, her West Point ring catching fluorescent light. 26 years old with a competitive edge sharp enough to draw blood, she'd spent 3 years proving women belonged in combat roles. Her blonde ponytail swung with military precision as she approached Alex's station. "Standards really have dropped," she announced to no one in particular, but loud enough for 15 nearby recruits to hear. "Girls like you make it harder for actual female soldiers." Weapons instructor Chen, a former Marine with eyes that missed nothing, called Alex forward for equipment issue. His Mandarin accent clipped each word with precision. "Hope you can handle more than makeup brushes, Princess. This isn't dress up." Alex accepted her rifle, and something shifted in how she held it. The weapon settled into her grip like water finding its level, her fingers automatically checking the chamber with a movement too smooth for a civilian. She turned the M4 over once, her blue eyes tracking the serial number with focus that seemed disproportionate for a scared recruit. Specialist Marcus Webb, a 23-year-old supply clerk who'd never seen combat but compensated with volume, leaned toward his buddy. Silver spoon rich girl, daddy probably paid her way in here. Watch her quit by week 2. From the observation balcony overlooking the intake floor, Commander Williams stood with arms crossed, his 45-year-old face carved into professional neutrality. But his eyes tracked Alex with interest that went beyond routine observation. Something about her movement patterns triggered memories he couldn't quite place. When Alex's name was called for barracks assignment, she pivoted exactly 90 degrees with heel-click precision that no civilian would execute naturally. Patterson's eyes narrowed fractionally, but he said nothing, simply pointing toward Building 7. Jake deliberately claimed the bunk directly above Alex's assigned rack. "Don't worry, princess. I'll try not to shake the bed too much when I'm sleeping." The implication drew crude laughs from a dozen throats. Alex said nothing. She began unpacking her duffel with movements that told their own story to anyone watching closely. Every item emerged and found its place with mechanical efficiency. No fumbling, no hesitation, no wasted motion. The barracks settled into evening routine as fluorescent lights hummed overhead and 50 recruits claimed their spaces in the open bay. Alex sat on her bunk edge, methodically organizing her locker when Elena Rodriguez, a 20-year-old from San Antonio with kind eyes and zero tolerance for injustice, approached with a tentative smile. "Hey, I'm Elena. Don't let them get to you. They test everyone like this." Before Alex could respond, Jake's voice boomed from across the bay. "Look at this! Barbie's making friends, how sweet." He accidentally bumped Alex's duffel bag with his hip, sending it tumbling to the concrete floor. Contents scattered across polished tile. "Oops! Butterfingers!" The platoon erupted in laughter, but something strange happened. As Alex knelt to retrieve her belongings, several recruits who'd been laughing fell silent. Her duffel contained no makeup, no perfume bottles, no hair products, just practical items. Plain white t-shirts, compression shorts, military-grade first aid supplies, and a battered notebook with Cyrillic lettering, barely visible on the cover before she flipped it closed. Marcus picked up a compass that had rolled near his bunk. "This thing looks older than my grandfather. No phone charger either. What kind of recruit doesn't bring a phone charger?" Alex accepted the compass back without meeting his eyes. "Thank you." Her fingers closed around the brass instrument with familiar reverence, thumb finding a worn groove in the casing that suggested thousands of previous touches. Elena helped gather scattered socks. "You've done this before, haven't you?" "Done what?" Alex's deflection came smoothly, her face maintaining careful neutrality. "Packed like this. Like you're going somewhere you might not come back from." Alex's blue eyes flickered up, meeting Elena's for just a heartbeat before looking away. "I just like to be prepared." That night, after lights out at 2200 hours, Alex pulled a worn photograph from beneath her pillow. 2 figures in military dress uniforms, their faces deliberately blurred in the dim light from emergency exit signs. She pressed her lips to the photo briefly before tucking it back out of sight. Marcus, pretending to sleep in the next bunk, saw the gesture and filed it away as another piece of the puzzle this strange woman represented. Sleep came fitfully to most recruits on their first night. But Alex lay perfectly still on top of her sheets rather than under them, body positioned for instant mobility, boots within arm's reach. Her breathing never settled into the deep rhythm of true sleep. When Elena whispered, "Good night," Alex's eyes opened immediately, proving she'd never fully surrendered consciousness. The fluorescent lights blazed to life at 0430 with an air horn blast that jolted 49 recruits from their bunks in various states of panic. Alex was already standing beside her rack, fully dressed, bed made with hospital corners tight enough to bounce quarters. Her gray t-shirt showed no wrinkles, her high bun remained perfect, and those blue eyes tracked the drill sergeant's entrance with the calm of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. Patterson stopped mid-stride, staring at Alex's area. Every other recruit scrambled into uniforms with the chaos of first-day panic. But this woman stood at attention beside a footlocker organized with professional precision, her boots already laced, her bearing suggesting military experience that should not exist in a civilian recruit. "Mitchell, when did you wake up?" 0400, drill sergeant. The exact military time notation, unprompted. "And you didn't wake your fellow recruits?" "That wasn't my assignment, drill sergeant." Jake stumbled out of his bunk, still pulling on his pants. "Some of us don't need 30 minutes to get dressed, princess." "Formation in 15 minutes, Patterson roared. "Anyone not on the pad is recycled to the next class." The physical training assessment separated those who'd prepared from those who'd lied on their applications. The 2-mile run course wound through Fort Benning's tree-lined roads, morning mist still clinging to asphalt as the sun crept toward the horizon. Male standard for passing, 15 minutes, 30 seconds. Female standard, 18 minutes, 30 seconds. Excellence began at 13 minutes for men, 15 for women. Jake burst from the start line like a linebacker escaping a tackle, his powerful legs churning gravel. "Try to keep up, Barbie." Alex started at an easy lope that looked almost leisurely, her breathing controlled and measured. But her form was textbook perfect, arms at 90 degrees, feet striking midfoot, cadence matching a rhythm that Patterson recognized immediately. That was Ranger School pacing, the specific tempo taught to special operations candidates to maximize endurance over sprint speed. At the 1-mile mark, Jake maintained his lead with Madison close behind. Alex ran in the middle of the pack, surrounded by male recruits who towered over her small frame. Nothing about her suggested competition. Her face remained placid, almost bored, while others grimaced with effort. The turnaround point came and went. Jake's pace faltered slightly as lactic acid began its inevitable work. Madison pushed harder, sensing opportunity. But Alex never changed speed. That mechanical rhythm continued, relentless as a metronome. At mile 1.7, she passed Jake without acknowledging his existence, moving through the pack like water flowing around stones. The finish line electronic timer beeped 13 minutes 45 seconds when Alex crossed. 30 male recruits still remained on the course. She wasn't breathing hard, wasn't sweating beyond a light sheen, just stood there with hands on hips, looking like she could run another 2 miles without breaking stride. Patterson checked his stopwatch twice, certain the equipment had malfunctioned. "Mitchell, have you run distance before?" "Occasionally, drill sergeant." "Where'd you learn that pacing?" "I read about it in a fitness magazine, drill sergeant." The lie came smooth as silk, delivered with wide-eyed innocence that would have been convincing if not for the sarcasm lurking in those blue depths. Jake stumbled across the finish line 45 seconds later, doubled over with hands on knees, chest heaving. Lucky. Wind at her back. Chen materialized beside Patterson, voice low. "That cadence, that's not beginner running, that's advanced training." "I know what it is. So why is she here? What's her file say?" Patterson's jaw tightened. "Her file says to shut up and train her like everyone else." The rifle range sprawled across 200 acres of Fort Benning real estate, earthen berms containing decades of lead deposits and the ghosts of 1,000,000 training rounds. Day 3 brought rifle familiarization, that critical moment when recruits touched their first military weapon. The M4 carbine, 5.56mm NATO, 30-round magazine capacity, effective range, 500 meters. Chen stood before 50 seated recruits, demonstrating field strip procedures with practiced efficiency. "You have 2 minutes to disassemble, clean, and reassemble. This is not negotiable. Combat situations don't care about your feelings." His hands moved with mechanical precision, parts flowing out in practiced sequence. "Time starts now." 49 recruits fumbled with their weapons, struggling to remember which part released what. Magazines clattered to concrete, bolts stuck. Trigger assemblies confused trained fingers. Jake volunteered Alex with a gesture to Chen. "Let Princess try. Show us what Daddy's money bought." Chen handed Alex an M4, expecting fumbling uncertainty. Instead, she received the weapon with both hands, immediately checking the chamber with a motion called brass check by professionals, tilting the rifle to visually confirm no round remained chambered. She released the magazine with her right thumb, pulled the charging handle with her left hand, and inspected the barrel bore by holding the weapon up to overhead lights, checking for obstructions with an efficiency that made Chen's eyes widen fractionally. Then her hands blurred, the takedown pin pushed through. Upper receiver separated from lower. Bolt carrier group slid free. Firing pin extracted. Cam pin rotated and removed. Each part emerged and found its place on the concrete bench in a perfect grid pattern. Components aligned with geometric precision that suggested not just training, but obsessive practice. 47 seconds. Chen's jaw dropped. The range fell silent except for wind whispering through pine trees. Even Jake stopped laughing. Alex's hands moved again, reassembling with the same fluid motion. Bolt carrier group reinserted. Cam pin positioned and locked. Firing pin replaced. Upper and lower receivers mated. Takedown pin secured. Charging handle checked for smooth operation. She press-checked the chamber one final time and handed the weapon back to Chen. 51 seconds reassembly. Total time, 1 minute 38 seconds. The current base record stood at 1 minute 55 seconds, held by a Special Forces weapons sergeant with 15 years' experience. Chen stared at the stopwatch like it had personally betrayed him. "That's... Mitchell, who taught you that method?" "I read the manual, instructor." Alex's voice remained soft, almost apologetic, but her eyes held something else. A challenge, perhaps, or a test to see if Chen recognized what he'd just witnessed. "Nobody learns that from a manual." Chen's Mandarin accent thickened with stress. "That's the Special Forces rapid disassembly method. Where did you actually learn it?" Alex looked down at her boots, the picture of submissive uncertainty. "I just followed the steps, instructor." Jake's face flushed crimson. She got lucky, probably practiced at home on her daddy's hunting rifle. But Chen wasn't listening to Jake anymore. He was looking at Patterson, who'd materialized at the range entrance. The two men's eyes met in silent communication that bypassed words entirely. Patterson gestured Chen aside. Their conversation occurred in hushed tones 15 feet from curious ears, but Specialist Brooks sat at the range computer station, accessing personnel databases with clearance that suddenly felt inadequate. "Her files restricted," Brooks announced, voice pitched low but urgent. Like, seriously restricted. "Says contact INSCOM directly." The Intelligence and Security Command notation made Patterson's weathered face go carefully blank. "What level classification?" "Above my clearance, drill sergeant, which means above secret. Maybe even top secret sensitive compartmented information." Brooks's fingers flew across keys. "It just says, training assignment, authorized by JSOC. That's Joint Special Operations Command. Why would JSOC care about a basic training recruit?" Patterson's eyes tracked back to Alex, who'd returned to her station and sat with hands folded, face expressionless, looking for all the world like someone who'd never held a rifle before today. The mess hall at lunch operated with cafeteria efficiency. 300 personnel cycling through in 90-minute windows, collecting protein, starch, vegetables, from soldiers who'd perfected the art of apathetic food service. Alex sat alone at a corner table, eating mechanically while chaos swirled around her. Her fork moved with metronomic precision, bringing food to mouth at regular intervals, while her eyes remained focused on a spot 6 inches above her tray. Madison approached with 2 female officers flanking her like an honor guard. Her voice carried across surrounding tables with practiced projection. "So, Alex, what did Daddy pay to get you in here? Or did you sleep your way past the recruiter?" Alex continued eating, not looking up, as though Madison existed in some parallel dimension her senses couldn't detect. "I'm talking to you, recruit." "I heard you, ma'am." Alex's response came soft but technically correct. Officers received ma'am or sir regardless of familiarity. Madison's face flushed. "Don't ma'am me. I earned my rank." "I'm sure you did, ma'am." No sarcasm, no inflection. Just neutral acknowledgement that somehow made the insult worse than any clever comeback. Marcus materialized with his lunch tray, deliberately tripping and dumping sweet tea across Alex's uniform. The amber liquid soaked through gray cotton, plastering fabric to skin. The entire mess hall erupted in laughter, 200 voices joining the mockery. Alex stood slowly, mechanically, grabbing paper napkins from the dispenser with movements suggesting someone following a pre-programmed routine. She wiped down without comment, without tears, without any visible emotional response. Then she walked to the serving line, secured a replacement tray, and sat back down in the exact same spot. Jake leaned back in his chair 30 feet away. "Not gonna cry, Barbie? It's just tea, Corporal." Alex's voice carried no anger, no frustration, just statement of fact delivered with the emotional investment of someone reading a weather report. Captain Reynolds, the base medical officer, noticed the exchange from the officer's table. His practiced physician's eye caught something else. Old scars on Alex's hands when she'd reached for napkins. Rope burn patterns, the kind climbers got from rapid descents, or soldiers got from fast roping out of helicopters. He approached Alex's table. "Mitchell, those scars on your hands, how'd you get them?" Alex's fingers curled instinctively, hiding the evidence. "Childhood accident, sir." Reynolds sat without invitation, his 40 years of emergency medicine making him immune to military protocol when medical issues arose. "I've treated rope burns. Those are rappelling injuries, specific pattern from tactical descent techniques. I used to rock climb, sir." The half-truth emerged smoothly. Rock climbing doesn't leave symmetrical scarring on both palms in identical positions. Military fast rope does. Reynolds leaned closer. "Want to try again?" Alex met his eyes for 3 full seconds, some internal calculation occurring behind those blue depths. Then she looked away. "Just childhood sports, sir." Reynolds stood, but before walking away, he made a note on his ever-present tablet. Something about this woman demanded investigation, and 20 years of treating soldiers had taught him to trust his instincts about who was hiding what. The medical equipment Alex had secured from supply represented cutting-edge support technology, originally developed for special operations personnel dealing with repetitive stress injuries. Her wrist brace incorporated carbon fiber construction with micro-servo stabilization mechanisms and real-time biometric monitoring capabilities, tracking muscle fatigue and joint stress through embedded sensors that fed data to a small processor no larger than a quarter. Military-grade compression sleeves like these cost upward of $800 in civilian markets, featuring moisture-wicking fabrics treated with antimicrobial silver threading and reinforced with Kevlar panels at stress points, where maximum support proved critical during extended operations. The prescription anti-inflammatory medication she carried came from experimental treatment protocols designed for elite athletes and combat personnel. Each dose formulated to reduce inflammation without compromising reaction time or mental clarity during high-stress situations, where split-second decisions determined survival outcomes. That evening brought the first field exercise, land navigation, across 5 kilometers of Georgia pine forest using only map, compass, and terrain features. Teams of 4, randomly assigned, except nothing in the military happened truly randomly. Alex found herself paired with Jake, Marcus, and a quiet recruit named Davis who'd said maybe 10 words since arriving. Jake snatched the map from Patterson's hands. "I'll lead. Princess can carry water bottles." The forest swallowed them within minutes, pine canopy filtering August sunlight into dappled patterns across forest floor, thick with decades of needle deposits. Jake led with the confidence of someone who'd never been lost, because he'd never ventured far enough from home to lose himself. 2 hours passed. 3. The canteen water ran low, then empty. Jake's confident stride became uncertain as trails failed to match his map expectations. "We should be seeing the creek by now," Davis offered, his first words in 90 minutes. "I know where we are," Jake snapped, but his voice carried doubt's telltale edge. Marcus checked his watch. "We're supposed to radio position every 30 minutes. Command's going to be asking questions." "Then tell them we're making good time. We're 3 kilometers off course." Alex's soft voice emerged from her position at the rear of the formation. Jake wheeled on her. "You don't even know how to read a map." Alex pulled her personal compass from a cargo pocket, checked the sun's position with a glance that took perhaps 2 seconds, and traced a finger along her own map copy without unfolding it fully. That ridgeline matches grid 375. We need to head 045 degrees northeast. How do you even know grid coordinates? Jake's confusion made his Oklahoma accent thicker. Alex said nothing. She simply started walking northeast, not checking to see if anyone followed. Where does she think she's going? Marcus demanded. Davis made the decision for everyone, following Alex's retreating form. She handled that rifle pretty good. Maybe she knows maps too. Jake had no choice but to follow or admit he'd gotten them lost. Pride won out over logic, as it usually did. The forest continued its indifferent existence, while 4 soldiers moved through undergrowth, 3 following one who supposedly knew nothing. Creek should be 200 meters ahead, bearing 070 degrees, Alex announced without breaking stride. The sound of running water reached them within 90 seconds. They emerged at a creek crossing that matched the map perfectly. Checkpoint 3 is past that tree line, 070 bearing from our current position. They arrived at the 3rd checkpoint 50 minutes before any other team, finding Drill Sergeant Patterson already monitoring their approach via radio. "Mitchell," Patterson's voice carried across the clearing. "How?" Alex stood at attention, her bearing textbook perfect despite 4 hours of forest navigation. "Lucky guess, Drill Sergeant." Patterson's eyes narrowed. He'd seen lucky. This wasn't lucky. This was precise terrain association, the kind of navigation that came from hundreds of hours of practice reading ground features and translating them into tactical movement. Back at the command post, Williams received Patterson's radio report with growing unease. She oriented off terrain like a ranger. Her file came back. Williams kept his voice low despite the privacy of his office. "It's flagged. No foreign in SAP. No foreign nationals in Special Access Program. Classifications reserved for operations so sensitive that even allies couldn't know details." "What's a SAP-flagged recruit doing in basic training?" Williams stared at the brief text file that had arrived via encrypted channels. "Training assignment authorized by Delta Force Selection Command. Do not compromise cover. Evaluate and report." "Sir, what does that mean?" "It means we watch her, and we tell no one what we're watching." Did you catch that detail? The way she moved through that forest, the way those supposedly trembling fingers handled military equipment like extensions of her own body. Comment below if you noticed something wasn't adding up from the very beginning. Or share if you've ever been in a similar situation, underestimated and forced to prove yourself in silence. Your stories might inspire someone else watching. Night fell on Fort Benning with the weight of accumulated heat finally lifting, temperature dropping from 42 Celsius to a almost comfortable 30. The confidence course loomed against darkening sky, barbed wire obstacles, 12-foot walls, rope swings across mud pits, and horizontal ladders designed to destroy grip strength. Night operations added complexity, depth perception vanishing in shadow, spatial awareness compromised. Madison ran the course in 8 minutes flat, her competitive nature pushing past female record times of 7 minutes 30 seconds. She finished with hands bleeding from rope burns, breathing like a bellows, but victorious. Jake thundered through in 6 minutes 45, missing the male record of 6 minutes 15 by 30 seconds. Still respectable, still fast enough to maintain his alpha status among the recruits. The crowd gathered as Alex approached the start line, 200 voices murmuring predictions of failure. Some placed bets on how long she'd last. Others wagered she'd quit before reaching the rope swing. Chen emerged from the instruction tower. "Mitchell, this is voluntary. You don't have to prove anything." "I'd like to try, instructor." Alex's soft voice barely carried to the front row of spectators. From his office window, 3 stories up, Commander Williams descended stairs for the first time in 6 months to watch a confidence course personally. Patterson intercepted him at the bottom landing. "Sir, why the interest?" Williams didn't answer immediately, eyes tracking Alex as she approached the starting line. "Curiosity." The buzzer sounded. Alex exploded from the line with acceleration that seemed impossible for her small frame, hitting the first obstacle, low crawl under barbed wire, with technique that minimized drag. Her body remained perfectly flat, elbows driving forward in efficient pulls that suggested muscle memory from hundreds of previous iterations. The 12-foot wall came next. Most recruits needed running starts, jumping to grab the top edge, scrambling with legs for purchase. Alex hit the wall at speed, planted 1 foot at the 6-foot mark, and pulled herself up using primarily arm strength, no leg kick required. Over the top in 3 seconds. The rope swing across the mud pit destroyed most attempts. Recruits grabbed with both hands, swung with desperate momentum, prayed for distance. Alex caught the rope one-handed, used it to control descent trajectory rather than generate swing force, and released at the optimal moment, with timing that suggested physics calculations occurring at subconscious level. The horizontal ladder, 40 feet of monkey bars designed to shred palms and destroy forearms, became Alex's final test. Most recruits muscled through with upper body strength, fighting gravity with every rung. Alex moved with rhythmic efficiency, each hand release and catch synchronized like a metronome, momentum carrying her across gaps that would have required explosive effort from someone fighting the obstacle instead of flowing with it. 5 minutes 52 seconds. Female record shattered by 38 seconds. Thompson, the hand-to-hand combat instructor, stood beside Williams in stunned silence. "Sir, that wall scaling technique, that's Volkov method." Volkov method? Old Spetsnaz approach, modified for American physiology. Only one American instructor I know teaches it, Colonel Victor Mitchell. But he retired 5 years ago from training command, and Thompson's voice trailed off as pieces connected in his head. And what? His daughter's name was Alexandra, but she'd only be, 22 now? Can't be the same person. Williams pulled out his encrypted phone, typing a single text message to a number with no contact name attached. Need full background on Mitchell, Alexandra. Priority highest. The response came back in 30 seconds. File sealed by JSOC. Confirm you have need-to-know clearance. Williams stared at his phone screen, then at Alex, who stood calmly catching her breath while 200 recruits whispered theories about what they'd just witnessed. The confidence chamber squatted at the edge of Fort Benning's chemical warfare training complex, a concrete bunker designed to make soldiers fear and respect the invisible enemy of airborne agents. CS gas, technically orthochlorobenzalmalonitrile, filled the sealed room at concentrations high enough to induce immediate physical responses. Tears, mucus production, burning sensations in exposed skin, respiratory distress bordering on panic in those unprepared for the experience. Standard procedure: don gas mask, enter chamber, remain for 60 seconds while instructors verify proper equipment function. Remove mask for 5 seconds to experience CS effects firsthand and understand why proper equipment use matters. Then exit with mask reapplied. Purpose: teach soldiers to trust their equipment under duress, to function through chemical exposure, to understand that panic kills faster than most weapons. Marcus Webb had been observing Alex for 6 days now, jealousy and resentment building with each impossible demonstration of competence. His opportunity came during pre-exercise equipment checks, loosening the seal on Alex's gas mask just enough that CS particles would infiltrate around the edges. Not enough to notice during normal breathing, plenty enough when exposed to concentrated chemical irritants. The chamber doors sealed with hydraulic finality, 40 recruits standing in 2 lines inside concrete walls, stained by decades of condensed tears and bodily fluids. Gas hissed from overhead dispensers, filling the room with white clouds that blurred vision and promised misery. Alex's mask began leaking within 20 seconds. CS particles infiltrated the damaged seal, causing immediate tearing, her blue eyes streaming water behind protective lenses. Standard response: panic, attempt to escape, rip off the malfunctioning mask in desperation for fresh air that didn't exist. Alex did none of those things. She remained motionless, breathing carefully through her nose, using techniques taught in SEER schools: survival, evasion, resistance, escape, training reserved for personnel at high risk of capture. Slow breath in, hold for controlled intervals, exhale through pursed lips to maintain positive pressure in lungs and prevent gas inhalation. Jake, whose mask functioned perfectly, watched her through the chemical fog. "Look at Princess now. Not so pretty when you can't breathe." 60 seconds elapsed. The exit door opened. Protocol dictated everyone remove masks for the mandatory 5-second exposure to understand what CS felt like unfiltered. Alex removed her mask completely and kept walking, and didn't cough, and didn't collapse. 20 seconds of unmasked exposure to CS concentrations that would drop trained soldiers to their knees. She walked through the exit door with eyes streaming but no coughing, no vomiting, no visible respiratory distress beyond what tears and mucus drainage couldn't hide. Chen stood outside, stopwatch in hand, mouth open. "How did you—" "Most people vomit immediately." I held my breath, instructor. Alex wiped tears from her face with studied casualness. "For 20 seconds? Through CS gas exposure that should make holding breath impossible?" Alex shrugged, that infuriating gesture of someone who wouldn't explain themselves if a firing squad depended on it. Patterson pulled Chen aside with urgency that bordered on alarm. "That's SEER school technique, CS tolerance training. She shouldn't know SEER techniques. That's special operations only." Williams, monitoring via camera feed from his office, picked up his encrypted phone one more time. Brooks appeared in his doorway before he could dial. "Sir, I got through to INSCOM. They said her file is locked by Delta Force Selection Command. They literally told me to stop asking questions and train the recruit." Williams terminated the call he'd been about to make. The message was clear. Someone very high up wanted Alexandra Mitchell evaluated under field conditions, and that someone had enough authority to classify her file beyond Williams's considerable clearance level. Week 5 brought routine medical examinations, blood pressure, vision screening, hearing tests, and the detailed physical inspection that often revealed what recruits tried to hide. Captain Reynolds conducted Alex's examination personally, his physician's eye catching details that would have escaped less experienced observers. "Remove your shirt, please. Standard procedure." Alex hesitated fractionally, a micro-expression that Reynolds, trained in reading reluctant patients, caught immediately. Then she complied, lifting the gray t-shirt to reveal a torso that told stories its owner preferred remain unspoken. Multiple scars, rope burns across both palms, symmetrical as Reynolds had suspected. A small circular mark on her right shoulder, barely visible against fair skin. Precisely the diameter and depth profile of a 9mm bullet graze. Surgical scar on left shoulder, 3 inches long, following the incision pattern for rotator cuff repair. The base's security infrastructure utilized military-grade surveillance systems with advanced facial recognition software, originally developed for counterterrorism operations. These integrated camera networks could cross-reference personnel databases in real time, flagging discrepancies in identity verification through biometric analysis that compared facial structure, gait patterns, and behavioral markers against classified records that supposedly didn't exist, except in servers buried under 3 layers of encryption and need-to-know access protocols. When Specialist Brooks had attempted to access Alex's file earlier in the week, he'd encountered encryption requiring top-secret clearance with sensitive compartmented information access, the kind of digital locks protecting special access programs where even knowing a program's name required presidential authorization. The digital security architecture protecting her identity cost more than most soldiers would earn in a decade of service, suggesting resources allocated by organizations operating beyond standard military command structures. Reynolds photographed each scar for medical records, his documentation thorough and professional. "These injuries, when did they occur?" "Over the years, sir." "This shoulder surgery, rotator cuff repair from repeated stress. Athletes get this, or soldiers who've done hundreds of rappels and carried heavy rucksacks for extended periods." Reynolds typed notes into his tablet. "Which are you?" "I was very active growing up, sir." "These immunization records." Reynolds pulled up her medical file, frowning at entries that shouldn't exist for a civilian. "Anthrax vaccine, smallpox. These are military-only inoculations, administered to personnel deploying to high-threat environments. My parents traveled extensively, required vaccines for their work." Another smooth half-truth from someone practiced at evading interrogation through technically accurate misdirection. "I'm noting this for command review." Reynolds closed his tablet with finality that suggested this conversation would continue at higher levels, whether Alex wanted it to or not. Before the big moment when everything changes, share this video right now. Seriously, you're going to want your friends to witness what happens next. And if you're wondering about that tattoo, about what it really means, keep watching, because the answer will make this entire platoon drop to their knees. Hand-to-hand combat qualification came in week 6, that transition point when recruits evolved from frightened civilians into soldiers capable of violence when circumstances demanded. The Combatives program, modern Army adoption of martial arts principles, emphasized practical application over artistic flourish. Sergeant First Class Thompson, 40 years old with scars from conflicts spanning 3 continents, had refined teaching methods through repetitions numbered in thousands. "Combat is not sport," Thompson announced to the 50 recruits assembled around the sawdust pit. "There are no referees, no rules, no second-place trophies. There is only winning and dying. We teach you to do the former." The format: one-on-one matches with protective gear, full contact until submission or knockout. Matches continued until Thompson observed sufficient skill demonstration from each recruit. Jake volunteered immediately when Thompson called for the next pair. "I'll fight Mitchell." Madison stepped forward with genuine concern overriding her competitive instincts. "Jake, she's half your size. It's not fair." She wanted equality. This is equality. Thompson looked to Williams, who descended once again from his office, this time accompanied by 3 men in civilian clothes whose bearings screamed military, despite polo shirts and khaki pants. "I'll allow it." Williams's voice carried the weight of command forged over 2 decades. "Mitchell, you can decline." Alex stood. "I'll fight, sir." Word spread through Fort Benning's social networks with the speed only possible in closed communities where everyone knew everyone's business. Within 15 minutes, 200 personnel ringed the Combatives pit. Recruits, instructors, officers, support staff, even kitchen workers drawn by rumors that someone was about to destroy the pretty princess who'd somehow infiltrated their training program. 3 unmarked vehicles arrived at the installation's main gate, occupants providing credentials that granted immediate access without standard security protocols. The visitors made their way to the Combatives training area with the purposeful stride of people accustomed to going wherever they wanted without explanation. Thompson glanced at Williams. "Sir, who are they?" Williams's jaw tightened fractionally. "Observers, nothing more." Jake entered the pit first, removing his shirt with theatrical flourish to reveal a physique maintained through obsessive gym dedication. Tattoos covered both arms, tribal designs mixed with military unit insignias from deployments he'd never actually seen. His muscles rippled under Georgia's sun as he performed stretches designed more for intimidation than injury prevention. The crowd chanted his nickname like a prayer. "Bull, bull, bull." Alex removed her jacket, standing in just her gray t-shirt and military fatigue pants, looking impossibly small against Jake's bulk. Her blue eyes tracked his movements with clinical detachment, cataloging reach, speed indicators, stance preferences, all the microsignals that preceded violence. Thompson stepped between them, hand raised. "Standard rules: submission or knockout. Excessive force will result in disqualification and disciplinary action. Fight." Jake charged before Thompson's hand dropped, closing distance with the explosive speed of someone who'd played linebacker since high school. His massive hands grabbed Alex's shoulders with grip force designed to intimidate through pain, lifting her bodily off the ground as though she weighed nothing more than a child's doll. "Give up now. Save yourself the pain." He slammed her against the wooden barrier surrounding the pit, the impact loud enough to make Elena wince from her position in the front row. The crowd roared approval, sensing quick victory. Justice served against someone who didn't belong in their world. But Alex made no sound, no gasp of pain, no plea for mercy, no acknowledgement that Jake had succeeded in anything beyond moving her from point A to point B. She just stared at him with those unsettling blue eyes, expression neutral as still water, waiting with patience that suggested all the time in the world belonged to her. "What, no tough talk?" Jake leaned closer, breath hot on her face, whiskey from last night's celebration still detectable. No girl power speech about how you're just as good as any man? Silence. Alex's lips didn't move, her eyes didn't blink. She became a statue in his grip, weight settling into his hands like dead mass, making him work to hold her position. Say something! His frustration mounted, manifesting in tightening grip, fingers digging into her shoulders hard enough to leave bruises on normal skin. Jake pulled back his right fist, telegraphing the punch with shoulder rotation that gave Alex 3 full seconds of warning about what came next. The crowd held its breath collectively, anticipating impact, vindication, proof that pretty girls had no place pretending to be soldiers. Jake's fist flew forward, and the sound that followed would echo through Fort Benning for months afterward. Not the impact of knuckles on flesh, but something else entirely, the sharp, violent sound of fabric tearing. Jake's left hand, still gripping Alex's collar, had caught gray cotton when she'd moved fractionally to evade his punch. His forward momentum combined with his grip strength created shearing force that exceeded the t-shirt's tensile limits. The fabric ripped, from collar to mid-back in one continuous tear, the sound impossibly loud in the sudden silence that descended like a guillotine blade. Gray material fell away like a curtain dropping, to reveal what had been hidden beneath for 6 weeks of mockery, harassment, and deliberate underestimation. The crowd froze. 200 pairs of eyes locked onto Alex's exposed back simultaneously, processing visual information that contradicted everything they'd assumed about the woman they'd spent 42 days tormenting. Jake's hands dropped, releasing her completely, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and something approaching existential dread in the space of 3 heartbeats. Madison's phone clattered to concrete, screen cracking in spiderweb patterns no one noticed. Chen stumbled backward, nearly falling over his own feet. Marcus made a sound that might have been a whimper. Elena's eyes went wide as dinner plates, one hand covering her mouth. And Commander Williams, standing 30 feet away with the 3 civilian observers, felt his knees go weak for the first time since combat operations in Fallujah 20 years prior, recognition hitting him with the force of an IED blast. Because Alex Mitchell's back wasn't blank canvas, it was a masterpiece. And everyone who could see it understood, in that singular, crystallized moment, that they had made a terrible, irreversible mistake. The tattoo dominated her entire back, shoulder blade to shoulder blade, rendered in black ink so detailed it seemed to move with each breath. At the center, a massive double-headed eagle spread wings across her spine, with such intricate featherwork that individual barbs appeared 3-dimensional under harsh sunlight. The eagle's twin heads faced opposite directions, one looking west, one east, their beaks open in silent screams that spoke of battles fought across hemispheres. The left talon gripped an American flag, stars and stripes flowing as though caught in wind, each star precisely placed, each stripe perfectly parallel. The right talon clutched an AK-47, the rifle's details so accurate that weapons experts in the crowd could identify it as a specific variant used by special operations forces across multiple continents. Behind the eagle, 2 insignias crossed like swords, the U.S. Army Special Forces patch with its distinctive arrowhead and dagger, intersecting with the Russian Spetsnaz emblem, a bat with spread wings and dagger clutched in claws, symbol of reconnaissance units operating in shadows where governments denied their existence. Text curved beneath the eagle's wings in bold military stencil lettering. Mitchell Legacy, in letters 2 inches tall. Impossible to miss. Impossible to misinterpret. Below that, slightly smaller, 3 generations, with 3 stars aligned horizontally. At the base of her spine, 3 dates arranged in descending order. 1973, 1998, 2023. Marking timelines that told a story to anyone who understood military service spanning decades and continents. Running vertically along her spine, integrated into the eagle's body. The wolf fears nothing, in English. Each letter shaded to appear carved into stone, but it was the smaller details that made professionals in the crowd stop breathing. 3 ranger tabs positioned at strategic points, a combat infantryman badge rendered in perfect miniature, parachutist wings, dive qualification insignia, and at the very top, barely visible above her collar line, a number that made Thompson stumble backward as though struck. "Ghost 7, Thompson whispered, voice cracking. "Kandahar, 2019. The silence stretched for 5 full seconds, 200 people frozen in tableau, brains struggling to reconcile the pretty princess with what that tattoo represented. Jake broke first, his face drained of all color, blood evacuating so rapidly he swayed on his feet. His hands, which had been gripping torn fabric, opened spasmodically, the gray material fluttering to sawdust. He took 3 stumbling steps backward, feet tangling, sitting down hard on the ground with an impact that should have hurt, but barely registered against the shock cascading through his nervous system. "Holy... no, that's not..." His voice emerged as a strangled whisper. "That's not possible. You're supposed to be..." Madison's knees buckled. She sat down on the pit barrier, both hands covering her mouth, eyes so wide they looked painful. Tears began streaming down her face without her awareness, body responding to stimuli her conscious mind couldn't yet process. "Oh my God," she repeated like a mantra. Oh my God, what did we do?" Chen snapped to attention so abruptly his spine made an audible crack. His right hand rose toward his forehead in automatic salute before he caught himself halfway through the motion. Uncertainty about protocol warring with muscle memory from years of military indoctrination. That's the Victor Mitchell crest. His Mandarin accent disappeared completely, replaced by California English he'd worked hard to suppress. The 3-generation warrior family. But she can't be. She's too young to have. Marcus backed away from the pit entirely, face ashen, bumping into people behind him without noticing. "I sabotaged her mask," he said to no one in particular, volume increasing with each repetition. "Oh dear Lord, I sabotaged her equipment. I could have killed." His voice rose to near shriek. "Do you understand what I did? I sabotaged a Mitchell's equipment." Elena remained frozen, hands still over her mouth, but her eyes showed something different from the others. Not shock alone, but recognition clicking into place like tumblers in a lock. "That's why you never fought back," she breathed. "You weren't scared. You were testing us." Thompson dropped his clipboard, the plastic clattering against concrete before bouncing into sawdust. He stepped forward, squinting at details visible from 10 feet away that confirmed what his combat experience screamed couldn't possibly be true. The 3 stars aren't just decorative. Those are Ranger qualification tabs. And that? He pointed with a shaking finger at the Spetsnaz emblem. "That's recon diver insignia. Russian Special Forces underwater demolition. How does an American woman have authorization to wear..." His voice died as the real impossibility hit him. This tattoo required approval from both U.S. and foreign military commands, the kind of approval given to fewer than 10 people per decade, the kind that meant this woman had trained with and earned respect from warriors on both sides of what used to be called the Iron Curtain. Commander Williams stood rooted 30 feet away, his professional composure cracking like ice under spring thaw. His face cycled through emotions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, shock, and finally, something approaching awe mixed with fear. When he spoke, his voice shook with an unsteadiness that made every enlisted person within earshot realize something unprecedented was occurring. "Mitchell," he had to clear his throat twice. "Alexandra Mitchell, daughter of..." The name caught in his throat. He couldn't complete the sentence, couldn't make his mouth form words that would acknowledge the magnitude of what 42 days of harassment had targeted. Instead, Williams's body moved on autopilot, decades of military protocol overriding conscious thought. He straightened to parade ground attention, right hand snapping to his forehead in the slowest, most formal salute of his 22-year career. He held it, arm locked, eyes forward, rendering honors to a woman he'd watched be humiliated for 6 weeks while doing nothing to stop it. Drill Sergeant Patterson, standing beside Williams, saw the commander's salute and reacted with instinctive obedience that bypassed rational thought. His body slammed to attention, hand rocketing to his brow, holding the position with parade ground precision despite sweat pouring down his weathered face. "Sweet mother of mercy," he whispered through clenched teeth. "That's why her file was sealed. That's why JSOC told us to shut up and train her. Specialist Brooks, still at his computer station 50 meters away, stared at search results that had finally bypassed encryption protocols. His screen displayed a single line. Mitchell, Alexandra, Tier 1 family member. Special access required. Training assignment authorized Delta Force Selection Command. Oh no. His voice came out tiny, childlike. Oh no, no, no. We've been harassing... He couldn't finish, hands covering his face as the implications crashed through his awareness. The three civilians in polo shirts and khakis, standing slightly apart from the military personnel, all raised right hands in synchronized salutes that marked them as current or former service members despite civilian attire. The tallest one pulled out a phone, typing rapidly, and within seconds, every electronic device within a 100-meter radius buzzed with an incoming message. One civilian spoke quietly to Williams, voice carrying just far enough for Patterson to hear. General Mitchell sends his regards, Commander. He's been monitoring via drone feed since week 2. He wanted to see how his daughter handled adversity. The crowd, that mass of 200 witnesses, experienced collective revelation in waves. First came the silence. 5 seconds of absolute quiet, where even Georgia cicadas seemed to pause their endless summer song. Then, sound erupted. Gasps, shouts, whispered profanity, exclamations of disbelief cascading across assembled personnel, like dominoes falling. That's General Victor Mitchell's daughter. The Volkov legacy transferred to American military. 3 generations of warriors, and we just spent 6 weeks. Someone get me transfer papers before she decides to press charges. Phones emerged from pockets, fingers swiping to record, to photograph, to capture evidence of the moment everything changed. Videos would be shared before sunset, spreading through military social networks with viral velocity, carrying the cautionary tale of Fort Benning's greatest training failure. Alex stood in the pit's center, torn shirt hanging from her shoulders like battle flag, tattoo fully exposed to merciless sunlight and 200 stares. Her arms remained at her sides, hands open and relaxed, posture suggesting someone completely comfortable being observed, despite the vulnerability of partial undress. She didn't try to cover herself, didn't show embarrassment or anger or satisfaction at the crowd's reaction. Just stood there with that same calm expression she'd maintained through 6 weeks of abuse, blue eyes tracking from face to face, cataloging reactions with the same clinical detachment she'd shown when Jake had grabbed her. Finally, she looked directly at Williams, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the sudden quiet with crystalline clarity. "Permission to continue the fight, sir?" Williams's salute faltered. "Permission. Denied, Sergeant." Patterson's head whipped toward Williams. "Wait, she's still private rank, sir. That's what her uniform shows. Not according to the file I just received from JSOC." Williams lowered his salute slowly, as though the movement required conscious effort for each muscle group. "She's been holding rank of sergeant this entire time. Special Forces detachment, on classified training assignment. Official orders say we were to..." He paused, jaw working as though the next words tasted bitter. "We were to evaluate her ability to handle disrespect and still perform duties with excellence." The implications hit like secondary explosions. Every act of harassment, every mocking comment, every deliberate attempt to make her quit, all of it had been observed, recorded, and assessed by personnel whose opinions could end careers with a single negative report. Williams continued, reading from his phone screen, with the mechanical delivery of someone repeating words he wished didn't exist. Alexandra Mitchell, Sergeant, United States Army, age 22, father, Colonel Victor Mitchell, retired, formerly Russian Spetsnaz GRU, defected to United States in 1995, naturalized citizen 1997, trained U.S. Special Forces for 20 years before retirement. Each fact landed like artillery rounds, reshaping the terrain of everyone's understanding. Mother, Colonel Sarah Mitchell, U.S. Army Rangers, first female to complete Special Forces qualification course, currently assigned to Joint Special Operations Command in advisory role. Madison made a sound halfway between sob and laugh, the kind of noise people made when reality exceeded their capacity for processing. Subject: graduated Ranger School at age 20, youngest female to ever complete the program. Qualified Seer, Level C. Expert marksman in 7 weapon systems. Currently assigned to Delta Force Assessment Pipeline. Placed at Fort Benning under false identity to evaluate military culture response to unknown female candidates. Williams looked up from his phone, fixing Jake with a stare that could have melted steel. And you, Corporal Morrison, just assaulted a federal agent on official assignment, during an operation authorized by the Secretary of Defense himself. Jake's face, already pale, went translucent. I couldn't have known. There's no way anyone could. Hyperventilation began, his breath coming in rapid gasps, hands clutching at his chest as panic attack symptoms manifested. Medics rushed forward, but Alex waved them off. He's fine, just breathing too fast. Jake, look at me. She stepped closer despite torn clothing, despite the power dynamic that had inverted so completely. Count to 4 breathing in. Hold 4, out 4. You're not dying, just your body responding to stress. The gentleness in her voice, after everything, after 6 weeks of his cruelty, made Jake's hyperventilation worse. But he followed her instructions, breathing slowing gradually until color returned to his face, and his hands stopped shaking quite so badly. Thompson found his voice, though it emerged hoarse and strained. Sergeant Mitchell, that technique you were about to use before the commander stopped the fight, is that your father's signature submission hold? Alex's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. Modified with some Sambo entry techniques my mother taught me. Wanted to see if combining Russian and American approaches would improve time to unconsciousness. How long? 7 to 9 seconds, depending on opponent size and neck musculature. She said it like she was discussing proper rifle cleaning techniques, clinical and detached. Would you like me to demonstrate on a volunteer? The crowd collectively took a step backward. No one volunteered. Jake pushed himself upright despite medics' protests, swaying slightly, but determined to face Alex under his own power. You could have told us, first day. Could have shown that tattoo and avoided all this. That would have defeated the purpose. Alex's blue eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made him want to look away but couldn't. The point wasn't whether you'd respect General Mitchell's daughter. The point was whether you'd respect a female soldier before knowing her family name. The words hung in humid air like indictment, and every person who'd participated in harassing her felt the weight of judgment from someone who'd earned the right to deliver it. Madison approached on unsteady legs, hands trembling so badly she clasped them together to maintain control. Sergeant Mitchell, Her voice broke. Tears streamed down her face freely now, mascara running in black tracks. I made everything harder for you because I was jealous, because you're beautiful, and I thought that meant you couldn't also be competent, because my own insecurity made me tear down another woman instead of supporting her. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Alex regarded her for a long moment, and Madison wilted under that steady gaze. Then Alex reached out, gripping Madison's shoulder with one hand. You made it exactly as hard as it needed to be, Lieutenant. That was the entire point. I needed to know if I could function under conditions worse than enemy fire, and thanks to you, I have that answer. The specialized tattoo ink used for military commemorative markings required unique chemical formulation, pigments designed to remain stable under extreme conditions, including chemical exposure, thermal variations from -40 to +60 Celsius, and even battlefield trauma that might otherwise cause standard tattoo ink to blur or fade beyond recognition. Professional military tattoo artists charged premium rates for work requiring security clearances, as many unit insignias and operational symbols were themselves classified above secret level, requiring background checks and need-to-know verification before artists could even begin design work. The double-headed eagle on Alex's back had been rendered using ink containing trace rare earth elements that would show up under specific wavelength scanning equipment, serving as a form of biometric verification, readable by customs systems and security checkpoints worldwide. Such tattoos could cost upward of $5,000 and required extensive documentation, proving the bearer had earned the right to wear symbols that represented sacrifice, measured in blood across generations. The approval process alone took 6 months, involving committees from both American and Allied foreign military commands, ensuring no one wore honors they hadn't bled for. Marcus crawled forward on hands and knees, sawdust clinging to his uniform, face contorted with guilt that approached physical pain. The gas chamber. I loosened your mask seal. The CS gas could have... He couldn't complete the thought, but everyone understood the implication. I could have killed you through equipment sabotage. I committed what amounts to attempted murder of a federal agent. Alex looked down at him without expression. I know. I checked my equipment before entry like I've been trained, found the damage, corrected it. Your attempt failed. But if I'd been better at sabotage, then I would have failed my evaluation, and that would have been my fault for inadequate equipment checks, not yours for trying. She extended her hand. Get up, Marcus. Soldiers don't grovel unless they're under enemy fire and using cover. He took her hand, and she pulled him upright with strength that seemed impossible for someone her size. Another reminder that appearances meant nothing when backed by training measured in years of daily suffering. Elena remained at the pit barrier, but her expression showed something different from the others. Not guilt or shock, but satisfaction, as though puzzle pieces had finally clicked into proper arrangement. You showed me what real strength looks like, Sergeant. Not the kind that pushes people down, but the kind that endures until truth reveals itself. Thank you. You were the only one who treated me like a human being without needing my credentials first. Alex's voice softened fractionally. Thank you for that. Chen approached with the careful movements of someone approaching unexploded ordnance. Sergeant, I trained under your father in Operation Iraqi Freedom, 2010. He taught me that the deadliest weapon is the one your enemy doesn't see coming. His voice carried reverence usually reserved for religious figures. You're exactly like him. And I'm honored I got to train you, even though I didn't know I was training someone who could probably teach the course better than I can. The afternoon sun beat down on Fort Benning with typical Georgia mercilessness as the immediate shock began wearing off and practical questions emerged. Williams issued orders with clipped efficiency, years of command experience taking over when emotion threatened to paralyze decision-making. Morrison, you're reduced in rank to private, removed from all leadership positions, and will face an Article 15 hearing within 48 hours for assault on a superior non-commissioned officer. His voice carried across the assembled crowd with amplification unnecessary but instinctive. Your actions created a hostile environment based on gender and appearance. You physically assaulted someone you believed helpless. The fact that she wasn't helpless doesn't excuse your behavior. Jake stood at attention, face blank, accepting judgment he knew could have been far worse. I accept full responsibility, sir. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. I judged someone on their looks and made assumptions that revealed my own inadequacy as a soldier and a man. Williams turned to Madison. Lieutenant Clark, your behavior violated officer conduct standards. Formal reprimand will be placed in your permanent file. Additionally, you'll write a 5,000-word essay on unconscious bias in military leadership to be published in the Fort Benning Training Manual and distributed Army-wide, due in 72 hours. Madison saluted, despite tears still streaming. Yes, sir. I deserve worse, sir. You do. But Sergeant Mitchell requested leniency for all personnel involved. She believes you'll learn more from completing training than from courts-martial and dishonorable discharges. If you're starting to realize that heroes don't always wear capes or announce themselves with fanfare, that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimated, then you need to hear what happens next. Next week, I'm bringing you the story of a man dismissed at an international airport for his battered suitcase and outdated clothes, until TSA discovered his passport contained a diplomatic seal that only 5 people in the entire world possess. If you think Alex's revelation was intense, wait until you see what happens when a janitor at the Pentagon turns out to be something else entirely. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Marcus faced Williams with resignation etched into every line of his body. Sir, I sabotaged equipment. That's a court-martial offense under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Article 108. destruction of government property, and Article 134, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. Sergeant Mitchell has requested leniency in your case as well. Williams's expression showed he disagreed with that mercy, but would honor it. You'll repeat the entire 10-week cycle with the next training class. You'll serve as an example of what happens when jealousy overcomes judgment, and you'll assist Sergeant Mitchell with whatever tasks she assigns for the remainder of her time here. The pattern continued for the next 20 minutes. Each person who'd participated in harassment faced consequences calibrated to their offense, none receiving the full punishment military law allowed, all of them carrying guilt heavier than any official sanction. Patterson gathered every drill sergeant afterward, his weathered face set in grim determination. Today we learned a lesson that'll be taught at this installation for the next 50 years. The soldier we underestimate might be the one who saves our lives tomorrow. His Kentucky accent thickened with emotion. Mitchell could have revealed herself day one, could have demanded respect through family name and classified credentials. Instead, she endured 6 weeks of harassment to teach us something we should have already known. Judge soldiers by their actions, not their packaging. Brooks showed Williams the security database, highlighting 17 other personnel files with similar classification restrictions. Sir, how many special operators are currently training here in disguise? Williams's silence answered more than words could. Thompson announced training curriculum changes effective immediately. The submission technique Sergeant Mitchell was preparing to demonstrate, we're adding it to standard combatives instruction. It combines elements from multiple martial arts systems with modifications for female-specific physiology. With Sergeant Mitchell's permission, she'll demonstrate for instructor cadre. Alex, who'd borrowed a replacement shirt and now stood looking almost normal except for the knowledge everyone carried about what lay beneath gray cotton, nodded acceptance. I'd be honored, Sergeant First Class. The mess hall that evening felt different. Alex entered for dinner and the entire room stood at attention without command, 300 personnel rising in synchronized motion that created a sound like thunder rolling through enclosed space. Silence descended, broken only by ventilation systems and distant kitchen clatter. Alex stood in the doorway, momentarily uncertain for the first time since arriving. As you were. Her voice carried the command authority her rank had always possessed, but she'd deliberately suppressed. No one moved. 300 people remained frozen, waiting for something more, something that would release them from the weight of collective shame. That's an order. Firmer this time, with edge that suggested disobedience would be poorly received. Slowly, like ice melting under reluctant sun, people sat. Conversation resumed in hushed tones, volume building gradually to almost normal levels over the next 10 minutes. But eyes tracked Alex's movement with mixture of respect, curiosity, and lingering disbelief. Elena gestured to the seat beside her. Join us? Alex accepted, sitting at a table that yesterday would have mocked her presence, but today offered silent welcome. The meal proceeded with stilted small talk, people around her hyper-aware of every word, terrified of saying something that might offend someone they'd spent 6 weeks offending with impunity. Jake, demoted and reassigned to different barracks, watched from across the room. His meal sat untouched, appetite destroyed by guilt and the realization that his entire military career had just taken a turn that might never recover. Madison sat with female officer colleagues, their conversation focused on the essay assignment that had morphed from punishment into opportunity. If I can turn this into something useful, something that actually changes how we evaluate female candidates, then maybe some good comes from my terrible behavior. The barracks transformation happened overnight. Jake's belongings moved to a different building per regulation that separated ranks. Elena and 3 other female recruits requested bunks near Alex's area, seeking proximity to someone who'd proven that gender meant nothing against competence. We want to learn from you, Elena said during evening hygiene routine. I'm still finishing my own training. Alex folded clothes with mechanical precision, a habit so ingrained she probably did it in her sleep. Learn with me, not from me. I'm not your instructor. You're the only female here who the men actually respect now. They should have respected you before knowing my background, That's the whole problem. The conversation highlighted the cultural shift occurring at Fort Benning, invisible but profound, as though Alex's revelation had exposed a rot everyone had learned to ignore and now couldn't unsee. Training culture began evolving in measurable ways. Female recruit dropout rate, previously holding steady at 3% through week 7, plummeted to 0% for the remainder of the cycle. Male recruits, previously treating female colleagues with condescending tolerance at best, began requesting advice on technique, tactics, and practical applications of lessons taught in classrooms. Madison launched Operation Real Strength, a mentoring program connecting junior female soldiers with experienced personnel who could guide career development through obstacle courses, both physical and political. We need to identify bias before it manifests as harassment. Sergeant Mitchell shouldn't have needed to hide her identity to receive fair treatment. Fort Benning policy changes flowed from Commander Williams's office with unprecedented speed. New regulation: all personnel files with special access program restrictions would have liaison officers assigned to prevent situations where highly qualified operators faced disrespect due to security protocols preventing identity verification. Anti-harassment training frequency increased from annual to quarterly, with mandatory attendance carrying teeth that previous versions lacked. Pentagon response arrived within 72 hours of the incident. A general from Joint Special Operations Command flew to Fort Benning personally, bringing with him an awards ceremony hastily arranged in Base Theater 1 before an audience of 800 personnel drawn from across the installation. General Marcus Hawthorne, whose chest displayed enough ribbons to suggest he'd seen every conflict since Vietnam, stood at the podium with presence that commanded attention without effort. Sergeant Alexandra Mitchell, front and center. Alex marched forward in dress uniform, her movements precise, bearing flawless, looking nothing like the uncertain woman who'd stumbled off a bus 6 weeks prior. By order of the Secretary of Defense, you are hereby awarded the Army Commendation Medal for exceptional performance during a covert assessment operation spanning 42 days. The citation reads, Sergeant Mitchell endured systematic harassment while maintaining operational cover, demonstrating resilience, professionalism, and restraint expected of special operations personnel operating under extreme duress. He pinned the medal to her uniform, then leaned closer, voice dropping below microphone pickup. Your father sends his pride, your mother sends her love, and every female soldier in the Army thanks you for what you just proved. The story leaked within hours, spreading through military and civilian channels with velocity that suggested someone wanted public awareness. Army Times cover featured Alex's photograph, face partially obscured per security protocols, standing before an American flag, back to the camera, tattoo visible in all its detailed glory. The headline: The Soldier They Underestimated. The article became the most read military story of the year, generating hundreds of thousands of comments, shares, and discussions about unconscious bias, gender discrimination, and the hidden costs of judgment based on appearance. 6 months elapsed between graduation and Alex's return to Fort Benning for a ceremony she hadn't requested, but command insisted upon. The Mitchell Award, established with funding from anonymous donors who turned out to be every general officer who'd ever trained under her father, would be presented annually to the recruit who demonstrated excellence despite facing adversity. The first recipient, Elena Rodriguez, who'd shown moral courage when it mattered by treating Alex with human decency before knowing her credentials. Jake completed his repeated training cycle, finishing in the top 10% of his new class. He'd written Alex a letter, forwarded through official channels, since she'd deployed overseas to locations he didn't have clearance to know. His words expressed gratitude for the lesson she'd taught through suffering, acknowledging that real strength meant overpowering your worst instincts rather than overpowering other people. Madison's essay became required reading at West Point, the U.S. Military Academy, distributed to every leadership course across the Army. Her honest examination of how competitive insecurity had manifested as cruelty toward another woman resonated with thousands of officers who saw themselves in her failure and resolved to do better. Chen published a training manual titled Advanced Combat Techniques, Integrating Eastern and Western Methodologies, dedicating it to Alex and her father, acknowledging debt to teachers who demonstrated that the best warriors rarely announced themselves through words. 3 days before Alex departed for her next assignment, a classified operation requiring her specific language skills and cultural knowledge, she stood alone in the combatives' pit, running through technique repetitions as dusk settled over Fort Benning. The sawdust showed scuff marks from 10 weeks of training, hundreds of matches fought, lessons learned through pain and exhaustion. She didn't hear Commander Williams approach, his footsteps silent despite size, until he spoke from the pit edge. "Sergeant Mitchell, permission to enter?" "Granted, sir." Williams stepped into sawdust, hands clasped behind his back, posture parade ground formal despite the informal setting. "I owe you an apology. Sir, you were following orders, testing me as directed by command authority. I was, but I could have intervened earlier, could have stopped the harassment before it reached levels that—" He paused, choosing words carefully, "before it revealed just how deep our cultural problems run. If you'd intervened, we wouldn't have learned the real lesson." Alex continued her movements, flowing through submission sequences with fluid grace. The lesson wasn't whether people respect a general's daughter. The lesson was whether this institution can recognize merit without knowing pedigree. "And what's your assessment?" Alex stopped mid-technique, considering the question with seriousness it deserved. "Mixed, sir. Some people here will change their behavior permanently. Others will revert as soon as they think no one's watching. But the data has been collected, and command knows what needs improvement. Your father wanted me to give you something." Williams produced a small wooden box, worn smooth by decades of handling. "He said you'd understand what it means." Inside lay a challenge coin, brass tarnished with age, bearing insignia Alex recognized immediately. Her father's original Spetsnaz unit, the one he'd served before defecting, before choosing freedom over orders that violated conscience. "He carried this through 3 wars and 7 deployments," Williams explained. "Said to tell you that every warrior eventually faces a choice between loyalty to institution and loyalty to principle. He chose principle, and so did you." Alex closed the box carefully, throat tight with emotion she refused to show through tears. "Thank you, sir. One more thing. Your brother." The name hit like physical impact, Alex's entire body going rigid. "Sir?" Williams pulled out a sealed envelope, classified markings covering every surface. "Information came through channels I can't discuss. Your brother Andrew's death 2 years ago. There are questions about the official report." Alex's hands shook, taking the envelope, the first time Williams had seen her display vulnerability since the tattoo revelation. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that require someone with your specific skills to investigate. Someone who can operate outside normal command structures. Someone who can't be bought, threatened, or intimidated." Williams met her eyes. "Someone command trusts to find truth, regardless of where it leads." "Are you saying Andrew's death wasn't an accident?" "I'm saying the evidence suggests possibilities that the official investigation didn't pursue. You have 72 hours before your next deployment. That envelope contains everything we could gather without alerting whoever might have been responsible." Alex stared at the envelope like it contained venomous snakes. "Who authorized this investigation?" "Your mother. She's been carrying suspicions for 2 years but couldn't act on them without compromising her position at JSOC. Now you've proven you can handle operations requiring discretion." Williams stepped back, preparing to leave. "Read the file tonight. Decide if you want to pursue it. If you do, certain resources will become available. If you don't, it gets buried permanently." He left her standing in the pit, holding secrets that might answer questions she'd been afraid to ask for 24 months. That night, Alex sat alone in temporary quarters assigned to transient personnel, the envelope unopened on the desk before her. Through the window, Fort Benning spread under sodium lights, thousands of soldiers sleeping or training, none aware that one of their number was about to open a door that might expose something worse than gender discrimination. She broke the seal. Inside, 3 items. A classified report with sections heavily redacted, a USB drive encrypted with military-grade security, and a photograph showing Andrew 2 weeks before his death, standing with 3 other soldiers whose faces had been circled in red marker. The report detailed Andrew's death during live fire training. Official conclusion: accidental discharge caused by equipment malfunction. Tragic but unavoidable. No fault attributed to personnel involved. But handwritten notes and margins, added by some analyst with access and suspicions, told a different story. Weapon malfunction, inconsistent with maintenance records. Trajectory analysis suggested shooter position incompatible with accident scenario. 3 witnesses changed testimony after initial statements. The training officer who'd certified the exercise as safe, Commander Williams, before his promotion and transfer to Fort Benning. Alex's blood went cold. Williams had just handed her evidence that implicated himself in covering up her brother's possible murder. Either he was innocent and wanted truth exposed, or he was guilty and testing whether she'd discovered his involvement. The USB drive required biometric authentication. Alex pressed her thumb to the scanner built into the drive casing, wincing as a needle pricked skin for DNA verification. The technology was classified above top secret, used only for information so sensitive that unauthorized access could compromise operations worldwide. Files opened, revealing video footage from Andrew's final training exercise. She watched her brother execute procedures with textbook precision, watched him check equipment, watched him interact with his team. Everything appeared normal until the final 5 minutes. Andrew's rifle discharged. He collapsed. Chaos erupted. Medics rushed forward. But in the background, barely visible, one figure remained calm. One soldier didn't react with surprise or horror. Instead, he checked his watch, as though timing something, then calmly walked away while others panicked. Alex froze the frame, enhancing the image until she could make out face details. The soldier was Marcus Webb, the same Marcus who'd sabotaged her gas mask, the same Marcus who'd, accidentally, spilled her belongings and made her life difficult for 6 weeks. Marcus had killed Andrew, and somehow ended up assigned to the exact training cycle where Andrew's sister would appear, giving him opportunity to, what? Intimidate her? Silence her if she grew suspicious? Test whether the family was still investigating? Alex's phone buzzed. Blocked number. She answered without speaking. Congratulations on completing Phase 1. The voice was digitally altered, gender indeterminate, impossible to trace. Phase 1? Fort Benning was the entire test. Fort Benning was baseline assessment. Phase 2 begins in 72 hours. What's Phase 2? You proved you can handle disrespect. Now we need to know if you can handle the truth about your brother's death without letting emotion compromise operational effectiveness. Alex's grip tightened until the phone casing creaked. My brother died in a training accident. What truth? It wasn't an accident. Meet me at coordinates 3879 Romeo, Quebec. Come alone. Tell no one. Bring the evidence Williams gave you. Who are you? Someone who served with Andrew. Someone who knows what really happened. Someone who's been waiting 2 years for you to be ready for this conversation. The line went dead. Alex sat in darkness, mind racing through possibilities. This could be a trap, could be the people who'd killed Andrew, luring her into isolated location for elimination. Or it could be genuine, someone who'd carried secrets for 2 years and needed Alex to be strong enough, skilled enough, proven enough to hear them without breaking. She pulled up the coordinates on her tactical GPS. Abandoned training facility 3 hours north, the same location where Andrew had died. Returning to the scene suggested either cruel psychological warfare or someone who wanted her to see something in person that couldn't be conveyed through reports. Alex looked at Andrew's photo, her finger tracing his face, remembering the last conversation they'd had. He'd called her 2 weeks before his death, voice strained, talking about pressure to pass qualification tests despite not feeling ready. They're pushing me through because of Dad's reputation. They keep saying, Mitchells don't fail. But I'm going to get someone killed if they deploy me before I'm ready. She'd told him to speak up, to request additional training time. He'd laughed bitterly. I tried. William said the family legacy was at stake, that I couldn't embarrass Dad by being the first Mitchell to need extra time. 3 weeks later, dead. Officially an accident. Unofficially, Murder covered up by someone who'd valued reputation over safety. And now that same Williams had handed her evidence of the cover-up, while also being implicated in it. The psychology was complex. Either he was guilty and testing her, or innocent and trying to make amends by exposing what he'd been ordered to hide 2 years ago. Only one way to find out. Alex dressed in civilian clothes, packing equipment that didn't appear on any official inventory. Her phone received another message, this time from her mother. "Your father and I trust your judgment. Whatever you discover, we'll support your decisions. But remember, truth matters more than vengeance. Love you, sweetheart." The drive north took 3 hours through Georgia darkness, rural highways giving way to forgotten roads that hadn't seen maintenance in years. The abandoned training facility emerged from pine forest like a monument to budget cuts and changing priorities, buildings slowly surrendering to vegetation and weather. Alex parked a quarter-mile away, approaching on foot with tactics learned from years of training. If this was a trap, she'd know before walking into the kill zone. The coordinates led to Building 7, a concrete structure where live fire exercises had once taught soldiers the difference between cover and concealment. Bullet impacts still scarred walls, decades of training etched in lead and stone. She entered through a side door, weapon drawn, senses operating at maximum awareness. The interior smelled of mold, rust, and old cordite residue that never fully left buildings where violence had been routine. "Lower your weapon, Sergeant Mitchell." The voice came from shadows at the room's far end. Male, older, carrying authority. "I'm not armed, not here to fight, just here to talk." A figure stepped into dim light filtering through broken windows. 60 years old, gray hair military short, face weathered by decades of service. He wore civilian clothes but moved with bearing that screamed career soldier. Alex recognized him from her father's old photographs. "Colonel Hendricks, you commanded Andrew's unit." "I did, and I've been carrying his death on my conscience for 2 years. Hendricks gestured to concrete floor. "This is where your brother died. Exactly this spot. The official report says equipment malfunction. That's a lie. Tell me what really happened." 3 soldiers in Andrew's unit were recruited by a foreign intelligence service. Nothing dramatic, just collecting information about training methods, equipment specifications, personnel movements. Low-level espionage that wouldn't typically justify lethal action. Alex's weapon remained trained on Hendricks, despite his claim of being unarmed. Why kill Andrew? He discovered the espionage, documented it, was about to report through proper channels. Hendricks pulled a small notebook from his pocket, tossing it across the floor toward Alex. "That's Andrew's personal log. He knew someone would try to stop him. He was right." Alex retrieved the notebook without taking eyes off Hendricks, using peripheral vision to scan pages. Andrew's handwriting detailed suspicious behavior, encrypted communications, evidence of information being passed to foreign contacts. The last entry, dated the day before his death. "Williams knows. He's involved somehow. Need to bypass chain of command." Marcus Webb was the shooter, Alex stated, pieces falling into final arrangement. Webb was the triggerman. Williams was the facilitator who ensured the cover-up succeeded. And I, Hendricks' voice cracked. I was the coward who suspected the truth but did nothing because I was 6 months from retirement and didn't want my pension endangered by whistleblowing. Why tell me now? Because you've proven you're strong enough to handle the truth without it destroying you. Because your performance at Fort Benning demonstrated operational capability that makes you uniquely qualified to finish what Andrew started. Hendricks pulled out a second USB drive. This contains everything. The real ballistics report, the original witness statements before they were changed, financial records showing payments to Webb and Williams from foreign accounts. Enough evidence to prosecute if you can get it to the right people without being silenced first. Alex caught the drive, mind already racing through options. Williams gave me partial information tonight, testing whether I'd investigate. Williams is trying to cover his tracks before you discover his involvement on your own. He's hoping you'll pursue false leads while he eliminates real evidence. Hendricks met her eyes. Your brother was a good soldier who died trying to do the right thing. Don't let his death mean nothing. What do you want from me? Justice, truth, and maybe, if I'm lucky, forgiveness I probably don't deserve. Hendricks turned toward the exit. You have 72 hours before Williams realizes what you know. After that, you become a target. Move fast, trust no one, and remember that truth is more important than revenge. He disappeared into darkness, leaving Alex standing where her brother had bled out 2 years prior, holding evidence that would destroy careers and expose betrayal at levels she'd never imagined. She drove back to Fort Benning as dawn broke across Georgia, arriving just before morning formation. Elena found her in the barracks, face grave. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have." Alex packed gear with mechanical efficiency. "I need to leave earlier than planned. Tell command I'm following up on classified intelligence related to my next deployment." "Alex, what's happening?" "Something I should have investigated 2 years ago. Something that's going to hurt a lot of people before it's finished." Alex closed her duffel, slinging it over one shoulder. But sometimes that's what truth requires. She drove off Fort Benning as morning formation assembled, 200 recruits beginning another day of training, none knowing that the soldier they'd harassed and underestimated was about to expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military command. The road stretched north toward Washington, D.C., toward JSOC headquarters, toward her mother and the resources necessary to finish what Andrew had started, toward justice, measured not in revenge, but in truth finally told, regardless of cost. Alex's phone buzzed one final time, her father's number. She answered on speaker. "I heard you found Hendricks." Victor Mitchell's voice carried weight of years and sacrifices. "Whatever you discovered, whatever you decide to do, remember this. Warriors don't fight for institutions. We fight for people. Andrew was people. Honor his memory by finishing what he started, but don't let it consume you." "I won't, Dad." "And Alex, your mother and I are proud of you, not because of your tattoo, not because of your skills, but because you had the courage to be underestimated. That's the hardest thing a warrior can do." The call ended. Alex drove through Georgia morning, sunlight breaking across pine forests and red clay hills, carrying evidence that would either save her career or destroy it, that would either bring justice or make her the next target. But that uncertainty didn't matter, because some battles were worth fighting, even when victory wasn't guaranteed. Some truths were worth exposing, even when silence would be easier. And some promises to the dead demanded keeping, even when the living would suffer for it. They'd mocked her at boot camp. They'd dismissed her as a pretty princess playing soldier. They'd learned, too late, that the most dangerous warriors were the ones who didn't need to announce themselves. And now, driving toward whatever came next, Alexandra Mitchell, sergeant, warrior, sister, daughter, and inheritor of 3 generations of sacrifice, carried forward the legacy her tattoo represented. Not just the ability to fight, but the courage to fight for truth against those who'd prefer convenient lies. Behind her, Fort Benning continued its eternal mission, turning civilians into soldiers, teaching skills meant for defending freedom, occasionally learning that the greatest lessons came from those they'd least expected to teach them. Ahead, Washington, D.C., and the confrontation she'd been avoiding for 2 years, the answers she'd been afraid to seek, and the justice her brother deserved, even if it destroyed everything she'd worked for. The road stretched endlessly forward, and Alex drove toward it with the same calm expression she'd maintained through 6 weeks of harassment, through revelation and vindication, through discovery and decision. Because that's what warriors did. They faced what needed facing. They did what needed doing. They paid what needed paying. And they never, ever apologized for being exactly who they were, whether the world recognized them or not. The tattoo on her back spoke of legacy, but the determination in her heart spoke of something deeper, the understanding that real strength came not from never falling, but from standing up every time you were knocked down. They'd tried to break her. Instead, they'd tested her and proven her ready for battles they couldn't imagine. The Mitchell legacy continued, and somewhere, somehow, Andrew was finally at rest. The miles disappeared beneath her tires as Interstate 85 carried her north toward answers that had waited too long in shadows. Alex's hands rested steady on the steering wheel, no trembling, No uncertainty. Just the same calm control she'd maintained through every trial Fort Benning had thrown at her. The USB drive in her pocket felt heavier than its actual weight, carrying secrets that would reshape careers, end friendships, and prove that corruption could hide behind the most patriotic facades. Her phone rang again. Elena's number this time. "You forgot something in your locker," Elena said when Alex answered. "A photograph. 2 people in uniform, faces blurred. Keep it safe for me. I'll need it when this is over." "When what's over, Alex? What are you really doing?" Alex checked her mirrors. Old habits from training she'd never admit to receiving. "Finishing something my brother started. Making sure his death meant something beyond a file number and a folded flag." "You're going after whoever killed him." "I'm going after the truth. There's a difference." Alex merged lanes with precision that suggested muscle memory from defensive driving courses. Truth doesn't care about revenge. It just is. And once it's exposed, it forces everyone to choose sides. "Which side will you be on?" "The same side I've always been on. The side that believes soldiers deserve better than being sacrificed to protect the guilty." Alex's voice carried weight that hadn't existed 6 weeks ago, or perhaps had always existed but had been deliberately hidden. Andrew believed that. He died for that. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he discovered." The conversation ended, leaving Alex alone with highway sounds and thoughts that refused silence. She thought about Jake, whose aggression had masked insecurity. About Madison, whose competitiveness had blinded her to solidarity. About Marcus, whose jealousy had nearly killed her but ultimately had killed her brother. About Williams, whose complicity had enabled murder. Each of them had taught her something valuable, though none had intended to be teachers. Jake had shown her that physical strength without moral foundation was just violence waiting for excuse. Madison had demonstrated how women could be their own worst enemies when they internalized sexist assumptions about capability. Marcus had proven that envy was more dangerous than hatred, because hatred knew what it opposed, while envy merely resented what it couldn't possess. And Williams had revealed the ultimate betrayal. Leaders who valued reputation over the lives they were sworn to protect. But they'd also shown her something else, something she'd carry forward into whatever came next. That change was possible. That people could recognize their failures and choose differently. That institutions, however flawed, contained individuals capable of growth when confronted with undeniable truth. The tattoo on her back told one story, but the scars on her hands told another, older story, about learning that pain was temporary, but weakness lasted forever if you let it define you. Every rope burn, every blister, every failure that had preceded eventual success had prepared her for this moment. Not the revelation at Fort Benning, which had been theater for lessons others needed to learn, but this moment, driving toward confrontation with forces powerful enough to murder with impunity and conceal it behind official seals. Her father had called her a warrior. Her mother had called her ready. But Alex knew what she really was. Someone who'd been given privilege and position, who'd transformed both into purpose, who understood that the heaviest weapons were often truth and testimony, rather than rifles and grenades. The Capitol's lights appeared on the horizon as sunset painted Georgia clouds in colors that promised storms ahead. Appropriate, Alex thought. She was bringing her own storm, carrying Andrew's evidence like thunder, waiting to crack open a sky that had stayed clear too long through artificial means. She thought about the recruits still training at Fort Benning, still learning lessons that would save their lives or end them, depending on how well they absorbed what was taught. Thought about the next female soldier who'd walk into that environment, wondering if Alex's ordeal had made things better or just driven discrimination deeper underground, where it was harder to document. Progress wasn't linear. It didn't arrive through single heroic gestures, but through thousands of small decisions made by thousands of ordinary people choosing, in moments that felt insignificant, to see each other as humans first and categories second. That was Andrew's real legacy. Not his death, tragic as it was, but his choice to speak truth knowing the cost, to prioritize conscience over career, to believe that one honest voice mattered even when drowned by a chorus of convenient lies. Alex would honor that legacy, not through vengeance, which was just another form of violence, but through exposure, documentation, and relentless pursuit of accountability that transcended military justice and entered the realm of moral imperative. The Pentagon loomed ahead, its 5 sides housing secrets that ranged from mundane to civilization-ending. Somewhere in those corridors worked people who'd helped Andrew, who'd known what he'd discovered, who'd stayed silent because speaking meant sacrifice they weren't willing to make. Alex understood that reluctance. She'd spent 6 weeks silent herself, enduring abuse because the mission required it. But there was a difference between strategic silence and cowardly silence, between waiting for the right moment and hoping the moment would pass without requiring action. She was done waiting. Her phone received one final message before she parked in the visitor lot and prepared to walk through doors that might not let her leave as free woman. Her mother's words appeared on screen, simple and devastating. "Your brother would be proud. So are we. Whatever happens next, remember that truth is its own reward." Alex sat in her truck for 30 seconds more, watching people enter and exit the Pentagon, each carrying briefcases full of classified documents, heads full of secrets, consciences full of justifications for why they'd done or not done what circumstances had demanded. Then she grabbed the evidence, stepped into humid Washington evening, and walked toward the building that represented everything her family had served and everything that service demanded when institutions failed to live up to their founding principles. The Mitchell legacy continued, but now it would include this: a daughter who refused to let her brother's murder be filed under acceptable losses, who'd proven at Fort Benning that she could endure anything, who'd learned the hard way that real strength meant standing up not just for yourself, but for people who couldn't stand anymore because they'd already fallen. Behind her, the sun set on another day. Ahead, fluorescent lights promised nights without darkness, interrogations without sleep, battles fought with words rather than weapons, but no less decisive for all that. Alex entered the Pentagon with the same calm expression she'd maintained through 6 weeks of hell. Because that's what warriors did. They finished what others started. They protected what others abandoned. And they never, ever forgot that freedom's price was eternal vigilance, especially against those who'd wrapped themselves in flags while betraying everything those flags represented.